The marble halls of Congress echoed with tension as a storm loomed, not outside, but within the chambers of America's most powerful lawmakers. Washington was electric, and not because of some impending vote on infrastructure or taxation. The center of the political earthquake was a brewing showdown between two sharply contrasting figures, Congressman Byron Donalds of Florida and Senator Adam Schiff of California. The buildup was months in the making. Senator Schiff, known for his role in high-profile investigations and the polarizing rhetoric that followed, had just unveiled a sweeping piece of legislation aimed at combating misinformation and extremism in political discourse. On the surface, it seemed noble. But hidden beneath the language was a sinister net cast wide enough to ensnare opposition voices, particularly conservatives. Byron Donalds had watched quietly, patiently, as Schiff made media rounds, pitching his bill as the salvation of democracy. But Donalds knew better. Behind Schiff's carefully crafted words lay the seeds of a dangerous power grab, an Orwellian attempt to monitor, control, and ultimately silence dissent under the guise of national security. Donald's staff had been preparing for this moment. Emails, memos, and even previously sealed committee communications had landed on his desk through whistleblowers. These documents painted a clear picture. Schiff's bill wasn't just about misinformation. It was about narrative control, especially on social media platforms, with secret backdoor deals between big tech and powerful lawmakers. The setting was the Oversight and Accountability Committee. Schiff had been summoned to testify on the implications of his legislation, and the media swarmed the corridors like bees to honey. Cameras rolled, hashtags trended, and pundits speculated wildly. As Schiff took his seat at the witness table, his usual smug composure was on full display. His voice, calm and calculated, began outlining the purpose of his bill. The Misinformation Counteraction Act, he explained, is designed to protect Americans from coordinated foreign and domestic misinformation campaigns that threaten our democratic institutions. The room was filled with murmurs of approval from his Democratic colleagues. But Donalds sat motionless, his eyes locked on Schiff like a lion stalking prey. When it was his turn, he slowly adjusted the microphone before him, cleared his throat, and began. Senator Schiff, Donalds started, his voice deep and unwavering. It's astonishing how comfortable you've become playing both judge and jury on what the American people are allowed to hear, say, or even think. You speak of protecting democracy, but your bill reeks of authoritarianism. Schiff's smirk faltered. Donalds continued, holding up a stack of printed emails. These are internal communications between your office and executives at a major social media company. You repeatedly pressured them to deplatform conservative voices, many of whom were later proven to be accurate in their assessments on everything from the Hunter Biden laptop to COVID origins. Were those voices misinformation, or just inconvenient to your party's narrative? Gasps rippled through the room. Congressman, Schiff began, but Donalds cut him off. No, Senator. You don't get to rewrite the facts this time. You claim your bill isn't political, but it disproportionately targets conservatives, church leaders, veterans, and everyday Americans who happen to disagree with you. You call it misinformation. I call it dissent. And dissent is the heartbeat of democracy. Reporters scribbled furiously. The air was thick with tension. Donald's voice rose, but remained composed. You once led an impeachment trial based on a whistleblower whose name you refused to disclose. You held secret hearings, redacted transcripts, and selectively leaked evidence. And now you want Americans to trust you to define truth. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Schiff shifted uncomfortably. I have the receipts, Senator, Donalds said, slapping the documents on the desk with force. You may wear the cloak of righteousness, but underneath it is a man drunk on power and allergic to accountability. The gavel struck. Order, the chair barked, but the damage was done. Byron Donalds had just fired the first shot in what would become the most talked about political confrontation of the year. Byron Donalds sat back slightly in his chair, eyes never leaving Schiff. The tension in the room had metastasized into something more visceral. Like everyone present understood they weren't watching a hearing anymore. They were witnessing an unraveling. Senator Schiff attempted to regain control. Congressman Donalds, let's not reduce this to partisan theater, he said, leaning forward. This bill is based on data-driven analysis and bipartisan intelligence findings that show how disinformation networks, many coordinated by foreign adversaries, are actively undermining our democracy. Donalds raised an eyebrow. Foreign adversaries? He flipped through a binder on the table. Is that why, Senator, your bill explicitly references surveillance mechanisms that collect metadata from American citizens? Are veterans foreign adversaries? Is a mom in Iowa sharing a post about vaccine side effects an enemy of the state? Schiff blinked. You've built a surveillance structure under the guise of national security, but what you're really doing is criminalizing wrongthink. A murmur swelled in the audience. Donalds didn't stop. You've consistently used your position to intimidate tech executives into removing posts and suspending accounts. Here's an excerpt, email dated October 14, 2020, from your office to the Twitter Trust and Safety team. This account is promoting discredited narratives regarding the laptop story. This needs to be dealt with swiftly. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. And guess what? Donalds continued. That laptop story was real. Not Russian disinformation. Real. Verified. Confirmed. But you called it fake. Why? Because it hurt your party's presidential candidate weeks before an election. That's not protecting democracy. That's election interference. Schiff tried to deflect. This isn't about Hunter Biden. Oh, but it is, Donalds interrupted. It's about truth. It's about the American people being denied access to facts because they didn't serve your political ambitions. The worst part? You knew the laptop was real. We now know intelligence officials had authenticated it quietly. But you went on national television again and again, telling Americans it was a Russian plant. By now, the press gallery was going wild. Tweets flew. Clips were already hitting news feeds. Your legislation isn't about facts, Donalds continued. It's about control. It empowers unelected bureaucrats to determine what speech is permitted. That's not American. That's CCP-style governance. Schiff opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He glanced over at his staffer sitting nearby, pale, frantically checking their phone, perhaps already aware of the firestorm erupting online. Let me ask you, Senator, Donalds said calmly. Will your bill allow for monitoring the New York Times if they publish something factually wrong? Will MSNBC anchors be held accountable under your new misinformation accountability framework? Or is it just right-leaning podcasts and conservative YouTubers who get censored? Silence. I'll take that as a no. Schiff tried one last pivot. Congressman, we live in a time when lies spread faster than truth. We need a framework to preserve democratic integrity. Donalds leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. You don't preserve democracy by silencing people. You preserve democracy by allowing debate, even messy, uncomfortable, inconvenient debate. Because in a free society, truth doesn't need a government chaperone. The room exploded in murmurs and a few spontaneous claps before the chair silenced the crowd. Schiff's polished veneer had begun to crack. His face, normally composed, now glistened with a fine layer of sweat. His words felt scattered, unsure, no longer carrying the authority of a man in control of the narrative. For the first time in years, Adam Schiff was on the defensive, and the country was watching. The following morning, the hearing had gone viral. Clips of Byron Donalds torching Adam Schiff with cold, hard facts saturated every platform from YouTube to Rumble, from Fox News to trending TikToks. Hashtags like #SchiffExposed and #DonaldsDestroys hit the top of Twitter's trending list. Even left-leaning anchors were forced to acknowledge the force of Donalds' performance. But it wasn't over. Donalds wasn't done yet, and neither was the Oversight Committee. As the hearing resumed the next day, Donalds entered the chamber with another binder under his arm, this one thicker, labeled simply, Receipts. Schiff was already at the table, and this time, the confidence had drained from his posture. No more leaning back, no more smirks. He looked like a man bracing for another public reckoning. Chairman James Comer gave the floor to Donalds once again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Donalds said calmly. Yesterday, I presented evidence that Senator Schiff's office worked directly with social media giants to throttle and remove constitutionally protected speech, under the banner of fighting misinformation. Today, I want to go further. He opened the binder. Exhibit A. An internal memo from the Department of Homeland Security's Disinformation Governance Board, a body your party claimed didn't exist until whistleblowers proved otherwise. This memo specifically references a list of domestic narrative threats. Number 1 on that list, criticism of COVID mandates. Number 2, doubt over the 2020 election process. Number 3, misinformation about the origins of the virus. Donalds glanced at Schiff. Senator, 2 years ago, you called people conspiracy theorists for suggesting that COVID might have leaked from a lab in Wuhan. You labeled them a danger to public safety. Today, that's the mainstream scientific consensus. Are those people still dangerous, or were they just 2 years ahead of your narrative? Schiff shifted in his seat. Exhibit B, Donalds said, holding up another document. A redacted but leaked email from your staff coordinating with a certain nonprofit that rates the factual integrity of political content online. This nonprofit receives federal grants and communicates with intelligence officials. Their job? Flag political posts for moderation. Their bias? Over 92% of their flagged posts came from conservatives. He dropped the paper dramatically on the desk. Cameras clicked. Senator Schiff, did you or did you not help funnel taxpayer money into a digital censorship machine targeting your political opponents? I categorically. Let me finish. Donald's tone was sharp now. No interruptions. Exhibit C, your public statements on the Steele dossier. You paraded it around like the 10 Commandments. You told Americans you had direct evidence of collusion between Donald Trump and Russia. Yet the Mueller report and now declassified documents prove it was a fraud. You knew. You were briefed. And yet you lied to the American people for years. Schiff's face was pale. Do you have any remorse, Senator? Donalds asked. Any sense of responsibility for the division and distrust you helped sow in this country? I acted in good faith based on the information available to me at the time, Schiff finally replied, his voice cracking slightly. Donalds leaned forward. That might work for the legacy media, Senator. But not here. Not today. The American people are tired of good faith lies. The air was heavy. Everyone felt it. For the first time in years, Schiff didn't just look like he was losing a debate. He looked like he was losing his grip on the credibility he had so carefully manufactured. There were no applause lines now. No MSNBC soundbites to rescue him. Just facts. And they were as unforgiving as they were undeniable. As the committee adjourned for the day, Schiff remained seated for a moment, stunned. Byron Donalds stood tall, surrounded by murmurs of admiration, even from some unlikely corners. Outside the chamber, reporters shouted questions. One asked bluntly, Congressman Donalds, do you believe Senator Schiff should be investigated? Donalds didn't miss a beat. I don't believe it. I know it. The days that followed were nothing short of seismic. Capitol Hill was shaken, not by policy or war, but by a truth reckoning that few in the political elite saw coming. The walls of political theater had cracked wide open, and through the wreckage, the American people got a clear view of how far narrative manipulation had embedded itself into the highest echelons of government. And standing at the epicenter of it all was Byron Donalds. Within 48 hours, Donalds' confrontation with Schiff was being hailed as one of the most powerful congressional grillings in modern memory. Even those who didn't typically align with Donalds were admitting, grudgingly or otherwise, that he had done what few Republicans had: dismantle the polished veneer of Adam Schiff with nothing more than documentation and precision. The media response was split, but predictably so. Left-leaning networks rushed to Schiff's defense, painting Donalds' revelations as miscontextualized, selectively edited, or part of a broader misinformation campaign. But even they struggled to explain away the direct quotations from internal emails and government memos. The documents were real. The coordination was real. And Schiff had no satisfactory answer for any of it. Right-leaning outlets, meanwhile, went into overdrive. Tucker Carlson ran a full special titled The Censorship Cartel, featuring Donalds as the guest of honor. Dan Bongino dubbed it the truth bomb we've waited years for. Even Elon Musk tweeted a video clip of Donald's speech, captioned simply, "But the real explosion happened in the heartland." Americans, long gaslit into believing their concerns were conspiracy theories, suddenly had validation. Millions of people who had been banned, flagged, and labeled extremists simply for expressing doubt on issues ranging from COVID to election integrity were now pointing to Donalds and saying, "See? We weren't crazy." In town halls across the country, citizens held up copies of Donalds' receipts binder. Some downloaded the digital version Donalds' office released online, titled The Schiff Files. It was downloaded 7 million times in 72 hours. Meanwhile, the backlash against Schiff was intensifying. A bipartisan group of House members, led by Donalds, Jim Jordan, and surprisingly, Democrat Tulsi Gabbard, called for a full investigation into Schiff's conduct over the past 4 years. Their primary focus, whether Schiff had violated civil liberties by colluding with government agencies and private corporations to suppress lawful political speech. Gabbard's support shocked the establishment. "I may not agree with Byron Donalds on everything," she said at a press conference, "but this isn't about partisanship. It's about truth. It's about protecting the First Amendment from the very people sworn to uphold it." The drumbeat grew louder. In California, Schiff's constituents were divided. Some stood by him blindly, convinced he was the victim of a right-wing smear job. But others, especially independents and moderate Democrats, began asking uncomfortable questions. Schiff's office was flooded with calls, many demanding accountability, others demanding his resignation. Then came the leak. A mid-level staffer from within Schiff's own office anonymously released a 27-page memo written months before the bill was even introduced. In it, Schiff's team outlined a communications strategy to mitigate potential backlash by creating partnerships with media outlets and fact-checkers and, more damningly, ensure narrative alignment with preferred legacy institutions. Narrative alignment. 2 words that hit like a hammer. Schiff went into hiding for 2 days, no statements, no appearances. Rumors swirled that he was prepping a legal team, not to defend the bill but to shield himself from a formal ethics complaint. Donalds? He was just getting warmed up. Appearing on a Sunday news show, he spoke plainly. "Look, we can debate policy all day. I'm here for that. But when an elected official uses their power to censor Americans, mislead the public, and exploit national security as a weapon against their own citizens, that's not politics. That's tyranny. And I'll fight that with everything I've got." The host asked, "Do you think Schiff will step down?" Donald stared directly into the camera. "If he has any honor left, he will." The halls of the Capitol had never felt quieter. Adam Schiff walked through them like a ghost, once a fixture on every news cycle, once hailed as the man who would save democracy. Now he was a man under siege, not from foreign adversaries or partisan rivals, but from truth itself. A special session had been scheduled, unprecedented for a sitting senator, called jointly by the House Ethics Committee and a bipartisan coalition concerned with growing evidence of constitutional violations. The evidence gathered over the previous 2 weeks, much of it thanks to Byron Donalds and whistleblowers, painted a picture of Schiff not as a guardian of democracy, but as its manipulator. The hearing chamber was packed. Donalds sat near the front, arms crossed. Behind him, several well-known free speech advocates and legal scholars waited to testify. The American public had turned its full attention to what was unfolding. This wasn't just a political reckoning, it was a cultural one. A line in the sand. Schiff finally took his seat before the committee. His face looked drawn, his shoulders hunched. It was no longer the posture of a confident public figure, it was the body language of a man carrying the weight of a collapsing empire. Chairman Comer spoke first. "Senator Schiff, this body has reviewed thousands of pages of documentation, internal communications, and public statements relating to your role in drafting and promoting legislation that enabled what many are now calling an unconstitutional suppression of political speech. Do you have anything to say before we begin?" Schiff cleared his throat, but his voice betrayed him. I acted to protect democracy. We were in unprecedented times. I did what I thought was necessary." Donalds raised his hand, was recognized by the chair. "With all due respect, Senator," he said, "you didn't protect democracy, you imprisoned it behind algorithms and red tape. You created a world where facts were filtered, dissent was silenced, and government colluded with private corporations to shape what people could see and hear." He walked to the dais holding a final document. "This," he said, holding it up, "is a sworn affidavit from a Department of Justice official who claims your office pushed for surveillance authorizations on domestic influencers without warrants, simply for sharing content critical of pandemic lockdowns." Gasps in the chamber. Schiff's eyes went wide. That's not verified." "Oh, it will be," Donald said coolly, "because the American people are finally awake. and they're not afraid anymore. As Schiff sputtered, trying to reclaim ground, Tulsi Gabbard entered the record with a formal call for an ethics censure. Other members followed. What began as a hearing turned into a constitutional intervention. Within 24 hours, the censure vote passed bipartisan, decisive. A week later, under mounting pressure, Schiff announced his resignation from the Senate, citing the toxic environment created by far-right disinformation. But even CNN couldn't spin it anymore. The facts were undeniable. The receipts had spoken, and the people had listened. Outside the Capitol that day, Byron Donalds stood at a podium before a massive crowd. Cameras everywhere. Supporters waving signs that read "Truth wins" and "Free speech first." He spoke not as a partisan warrior, but as an American. This is not about Democrat versus Republican. It's about power versus people. Adam Schiff used fear and secrecy to build a throne of lies. But today, that throne crumbles. Not because of me. Not because of one moment. But because the American people stood up and said no more. The crowd roared. He continued, voice booming. We will never allow unelected bureaucrats or career politicians to decide what truth we're allowed to hear. We will fight for the Constitution, not with violence, but with vigilance. This isn't the end of something dark. It's the beginning of something bright. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, lighting the Capitol dome in a golden hue, a new chapter had begun, not just for Donalds, not just for politics, but for freedom itself.